Hi, Bruno here. Welcome to Spainguru. The Spanish immigration law regulation reform in 2022. The reform of regulation of the immigration law has already entered into force on August 16, 2022, and it implies a larger number of important changes that will benefit any foreigner that comes to live in Spain or is already living in the country. The changes that this reform has brought benefits clearly to the foreigners who seek to live and work in Spain. It is now much easier to obtain a residence and work permit. The Arraigo figures are also changed. Foreign students can also benefit from changes in this reform among many others, and probably the students are the ones who benefit the most. It's important to notice that this reform is not retroactive. Applications submitted prior to the entry into force of this royal decree and the regulations approved by it will be processed and resolved in accordance with the regulations in force on the date of submission, unless the interested party requests the application of the provisions of this royal decree and regulations approved by it, and provided that compliance with the requirements for each type of applications is accredited. And of course, in the video description below, you can find the link to the article, and inside the article, all the links. For example, the official text of the royal decree, you can find it there if you want to read it, of course, in Spanish. If you are interested in knowing how you can benefit from these changes, this article and video is for you. The Spanish context. The Spanish government has made a clear movement to improve the immigration law regulation to face the current labor market challenges. Even though many jobs in Spain have problems finding qualified candidates, it has been difficult to secure a job permit up until now, which has hurt the country's economy. Many modifications that simplify the application of Spanish immigration law and improve it for foreigners wishing to live in Spain have been adopted in an effort to find a solution. The main takeaways from this reform are as follows. Adapts the types of arraigos to current needs, eliminates the requirements for foreign students to stay for 3 years in order to enter the labor market, which makes it easier for master students to stay, expands the channel for covering vacancies through the articulation of flexible channels for hiring workers who are abroad, facilitates the application for self-employment from abroad, self-employed workers. It makes the seasonal work model, circular migration, more flexible, which was more rigid, and it changes the immigration management model through the reduction of administrative burdens and simplification of procedures. Below you will find the list of the main improvements that this reform is bringing. Now let's go with the expanded list of job positions that are difficult to fill. Prior to this significant adjustment of the law regulation, the list of hard-to-fill jobs and the shortage list was much smaller and did not reflect the demands of the labor market at the time. As a result, a first employment permit could be obtained if the job position was in this unusually small list or by the difficult to obtain certificate of inadequate candidates for the job. The catalog of professions are now far more varied, making it simpler to locate open positions. Now it will be much easier for foreigners to come to live to Spain. Faster timing to hire foreigners in origin countries. The possibility of obtaining a work permit will be much faster thanks to a great reduction in deadlines. Any company that needs to fill a job position that is not included in the catalog of difficult to fill positions and cannot hire anyone else who is in Spain will be able to hire foreign nationals more easily and more quickly from their country of origin. From mid-2022, the job offers to prove the lack of applicants will only have to be published for 8 days on the Empleate web portal. In the case that after this period no workers are found, the Public Employment Service, SEPE, will issue a certificate of insufficiency within 3 days. This will happen after the issuance of a report with all the details of the selection process, including, for example, how many vacancies there were, applicants to the position, and the reasons why they have not been hired in the end. After this 3-day period, the application for an official residence and work permit may be submitted to the Foreigner's Office or Oficina de Extranjería. Work permit renewals will be for 4 years instead of 2. This is the most remarkable and foreign-friendly changes of the entire immigration reform, making it easier for foreigners to stay in Spain for a longer term. Until now, as a foreigner, you got your temporary card for 1 year. After that first year, you had to renew for 2 more years. After those 2 years, plus the first one, so 3 years, you renewed for 2 extra years, totaling 5, before you could go for a long-term residency. As for the work permit, after the initial 1-year card, the renewal will be for 4 years now, substantially simplifying foreigners' lives in the country and removing a significant bureaucratic load. Renewals will also be more simpler, going forward with the fewer arduous procedures and making the renewal assumptions more flexible. And initial residency and work authorization or social arraigo, for example, may be renewed with simply having worked 3 months instead of 6 and having actively sought employment, registering with the SEPE, the Unemployment Office. Getting a self-employment permit will be simpler. The government wants to assist self-employed persons by obtaining their work permits, even though we have already seen 2 policies that directly benefit employed workers. Therefore, the goal is to lessen the restrictions that must currently be met by any foreign applicant for a permission to engage in their economic activity as independent professionals in Spain. More specifically and significantly, the economic evidence that the foreign applicant must provide in the application to show that the project will receive adequate financial backing is decreased. Additionally, they have started to take into account data for self-employment that is highly relevant in the current economic climate, such as individuals who own digital or internet-based businesses or provide advice online. The number of hours that foreigners with student visas can work will increase. Up until recently, anyone from outside the country who had a student visa could only work for a total of 20 hours per week while finishing their education or training. This will change now from 20 hours to 30 hours a week as a result of the recent immigration law reform, which undoubtedly benefits the student population by making it simpler for them to make money while they are in education. Limitations on geographic scope are lifted. This means that students may work wherever in Spain so long as doing so does not interfere with their ability to finish their education. Student visas will immediately allow them to work. Before now, if you were on a Spanish student visa and needed to get a job, the company you were hired by had to begin the immigration process in order to get you a work permit. This is history. Students will now be allowed to work immediately for their own account and for someone else's account with their student visa without having to go through any additional formalities. Here's an example of an old TIE and a new TIE where you can see autoriza a trabajar. Also, check the dates in the document. I think you can see here on the top. You can see this one is from 30 of June 2023 and says autoriza a trabajar, and you can see below, sorry, because this is mirroring this image, this is an older one from the previous year, 30 of June 2022, and it says no autoriza a trabajar. That will continue to be the case while the international student is in school studying one of the 4 types of education: higher education, specific education for a job, training aimed towards acquiring a technical aptitude or professionalism certificate, professional certifications or license required for the entry into a certain occupation. However, if none of the above is met, but your studies include the need to do an internship, you will neither need a work permit and you will be able to do it directly without any further procedures. Changing from a student visa to a work permit will no longer require a 3-year period. This is a huge change. The government has also accelerated the conversion of student visas to residence and employment in order to encourage the hiring of foreign workers and provide better facilities for obtaining a work permit. Currently, a student must have had his study visa for at least 3 years in order to obtain a student visa modification to residence and employment permit. The foreigners' plans were complicated by having to renew and continue renewing until they could achieve this criteria because the studies often last for significantly shorter periods of time. Now that the new law has been approved, both the employment geographical restriction and the 3-year term are gone, and hopefully forever. Larger family reunification, reagrupación familiar facilities. Reuniting your family and traveling to Spain with them will be much simpler from now on. This is particularly true for everyone who makes less money because the costs associated with doing this procedure have been decreased and are now less onerous. We have the situation of minor children as an example. You can now regroup all your kids regardless of the amount of kids if you make €1,000 a month, which is equal to the minimum interprofessional salary in 2022. There are talks about raising it to €1,083, but this has to go through the government, and all the parties that conform the government has to find an agreement in raising this minimum salary. In the case that you do not earn that quantity, in order to regroup a youngster, you must show proof of 110% of the minimum vital income, ingreso mínimo vital, which works out to be €702 in total. You will also need an additional €64 for each additional child you wish to bring with you. Major adjustments to Arraigo Laboral. It will firstly be limited to foreigners who have previously worked lawfully but are presently in an irregular circumstance at the time of the application. In the situation of immigrants who have engaged in irregular employment, the labor authorities must work with a new separate figure called Permission for Extraordinary Circumstances or Permiso por Circunstancias Excepcionales en colaboración con las autoridades laborales. It is still necessary to have lived in Spain continuously for at least 2 years. This is defined as having had no more than 90 days of absences throughout the previous 2 years. Additionally, the 2 years in Spain are still required, but you must now show that you have worked for 6 months while putting in more than 30 hours per week, or 15 hours per week when calculating a year. Part-time employment is accepted too from now on. And last but not least, the freelancer is added to Arraigo Laboral, making this residence permit also available to those who have been self-employed for at least 6 months. Modifications to Arraigo Social requirements. Significant changes will make it simpler to access and establish an Arraigo Social. Up to this point, finding a 1-year contract was required to apply for Arraigo Social. After this reform, however, it won't be necessary anymore because any contract that ensures a minimum wage and length is valid. For example, a 3-month contract would be sufficient. It will be crucial to ensure that the sum of the days is at least 30 hours in the overall calculation and that the time amount to be received is once more at least the minimum interprofessional salary, SMI. If, on the other hand, Arraigo Social is requested with more than one contract, for example, multiple part-time offers, which is entirely possible. However, if you have small children, the contract can also have a minimum time requirement of 20 hours. The criminal record may be valid for a maximum of 6 months. On the other hand, less documentation is required to operate independently as self-employed individual in terms of Arraigo Social or social routes. You will need a business plan, the necessary economic means to make an investment, the necessary economic means to live in Spain. In many circumstances, the Arraigo Familiar, family ties, or family roots will replace the community card. Another significant alteration due to the fact that authorizations will now be granted based on family ties rather than community card, all relatives of Spaniards will be now included in the general regime or régimen general. Along with the parents of Spanish-speaking children, this also covers partner, spouse, descendants, and ascendants. The latter scenario would result in them receiving their card as long as they cohabitate with the minor or do not cohabitate but are in compliance with their parent-child obligations. There are also beneficial changes regarding Spanish ancestors. Now, as a result of family roots, it will be much simpler for them. There is a definite distinction between the two situations. Ascendants under 65 must demonstrate that they live as dependents in order to formalize their family ties, while those over 65 who do not live as dependents can obtain the residence directly. Also, it is possible for caregivers of the disabled who reside with the person's family to obtain this type of residence. And of course, you can find a link to a full-length article about Arraigo Familiar. Now, new Arraigo para la formación, training Arraigo. On the other hand, Arraigo para la formación is a brand new residence form that has been developed as a result of exceptional conditions. All foreigners who have been continuously in an irregular position in Spain for at least 2 years and decide to begin training or studies that lead them to obtain an official regulated degree will be awarded this 1-year residency, which is renewable for an additional year. It will be necessary to dedicate yourself to completing this training in order to obtain it. However, it cannot be any kind of education. It cannot be online, it must fall under the list of permitted trainings, and it can last no longer than 18 months or 1 year and a half. Additionally, it must begin as soon as the Arraigo is requested and within 6 months of the application submission. There is a window of 3 months after this permit has been granted to present registration documentation. In two situations. First, if the training lasts longer than 12 months, and second, if the length exceeds the expiration of the authorization granted, a single extension may also be requested for an additional 12-month period. After completing the studies, they could change to a work permit as long as you find a job offer that offers at least the interprofessional minimum wage, or SME, as we said, €1,000 as of 2022. It is important to bear in mind that the modification will have to be requested within the validity of the card, and it will be granted for a period of 2 years. No longer a requirement after renewal to apply to get or change to a new work permit when going from employee to self-employed or vice versa. The new regulation eliminates the requirement to obtain a modification from employee to self-employed or vice versa, since once you renew your work permit for the first time, you can now work as an employee or self-employed without the need to formalize any additional legal procedure. Renewal of a family reunification card is substantially more beneficial. As a result, even if the couple has been dissolved or divorced, once the regroupee renews his card, the duration of his renewal will now be equivalent to the card held by the main holder, regrouper. When renewing, the regrouped, for example, would also receive a long-term residence if the holder has a long-term residence too. Last but not least, the updated card will grant permission to work as an employee or self-employed. The updated visa application process. Your visa application can now be formalized electronically or online at the Spanish consulate in your country of origin. This procedure will take much less time than before. This change is extremely beneficial because it eliminates the need to schedule an in-person appointment and travel to the consulate in your country of origin to make the presentation. The Immigration Files Processing Unit is established, or Unidad de Tramitación de Expedientes de Extranjería, UTEE. Many immigrants experience lengthy delays in the settlement of their files prior to the implementation of this revision in the immigration regulation. Resolutions that should have taken no more than 3 months took up to 8 or 10 months. The Immigration Files Processing Unit, UTEX, was established with the goal of assisting the most overworked immigration offices in order to solve this issue. As a result, it will begin contributing at the beginning of 2023, right now, making it possible to receive a much faster response. Please notice that this article is no legal advice. If you need immigration experts, you can go to Spainguru.es and go to the top menu on the left side and search for consultations. If you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button so you don't miss any of the new content that we upload to the video. And if you need expert advice, just go on Spainguru.es. You will find immigration lawyers. You will find also tax experts if you need to file taxes in Spain and also in the USA. You will find also relocation services in Spain, apostille services from the US, sworn translators, and health insurances when you apply for no lucrative visa, when you apply for golden visa, student visa. You will need health insurances as well. And we also offer certificate of good health for the UK residents. And also, if you need to go back to the States and you need a health insurance, we also offer those health insurances too. And of course, if you want to be part of a community, please join our Facebook group, Spain Immigration and Residency Questions, Spainguru.yes. With more than 16,000 members, where you can ask any single question related to Spanish immigration issues, and you can do it also anonymously. You can also join our non-lucrative visa group with more than 800 members, our Spanish digital nomad visa group. Very important, last but not least, please subscribe to our newsletter. You can opt out anytime. We send this newsletter every single Monday morning, and we feature top discussions on our community and any news related to Spanish immigration. That's all for today. Thank you very much for watching. I wish you a great day. This is Bruno from Spainguru.es. Goodbye.